Alright, here are about 15 passages that I want to read from Northwest Passage, alright, that I found interesting. And they're random. They're a part of the story, but they're pretty random too. So, let's start with the first one here. Ethics was taught in the college while I was there. For another, my aptitude for drawing inclined me toward the classes of the Hollis Professor of Mathematics and Natural Philosophy. Under him I studied natural and experimental philosophy, which matters were of small worth to a clergyman, but of great value to me. Pneumatics, hydrostatics, mechanics, statics, optics, the doctrine of proportions, the principles of algebra, conic sections, plane and spherical trigonometry, the general principles of mensurations, planes and solids, the principles of astronomy and geography, the doctrine of the spheres, the use of the globes, the motion of the heavenly bodies according to the hypothesis of Ptolemy, Tycho Brahe, and Copernicus, the division of the world into its various kingdoms, the use of the maps, and so on. And that's the classes he was taking at, I believe, Harvard. He also mentioned brickbats, which I found interesting. He was doing something with brickbats, if that's even readable. Which, oh, it's the wrong finger. Alright, the next one. This one was page 14. The next one is 39. Okay. Almost the worst. Okay, this is to describe artists and their they don't stand a chance in the economic world. Almost the worst of the lot were the artists, a rude and clownish crew, unsavory and irreligious. They had no standing whatsoever. Painters, actors, mountebanks, they were all in the same boat. A wicked and adulterous generation. Even the family solicitor was preferable to an artist. I've seen artists left kicking their heels for hours in gentlemen's antechambers. They were poor men, too. All their lives they lived miserably in dire poverty. He coughed behind his hand, and I saw him glance at Elizabeth. For the most part, they were drunkards. And this is Elizabeth's dad, who is a preacher. Alright, he went on to say, just a short one here, I had rather be a doorkeeper in a house of my God than to dwell in the tents of the wickedness. And then, I'll continue. And for every Lely and Neller there were thousands of unsuccessful paint daubers who thought they were artists. They rolled in gutters, starved and froze in garrets, filled their bellies with the husks that the swine did eat. He really doesn't care for artists too well. Alright, that was page 39. Now I got page 71. Okay, and this is introducing a character. His name is McNaught, and he's throughout the whole story. He comes and goes. McNaught, it appears, had lived... Wait, what is this about? Okay, this is describing the Indians destroying the lands of the settlers. McNaught, it appeared, had lived most of his life in Dunbarton, and so too had Rogers, except during those periods when the French-led St. Francis Indians, coming down from the north, had burned the farmhouses, destroyed the crops, slaughtered the cattle, chopped down the fruit trees, scalped settlers and stolen women and children, and so forced farmers to seek sanctuary in blockhouses in the larger settlements. So that's describing how these Indians were really tearing up the settlers' areas in the 1750s, and Rogers Rangers got sent in to take care of them. And just took out that whole village. This is page 121. Okay, and this is like, I remember in the Marines, I wasn't in the Marines, but in the Air Force, they say everybody's green. And that's part of this quote, pretty much, back in the 1750s. He lowered his head and stared at his officers out of stony eyes. All the men in this detachment are Rangers. Understand? Rangers. They aren't Scotchmen or Englishmen or Irishmen or provincials or regulars or anything else. They're Rangers. And if I find two Irishmen leagued together as Irishmen and not as Rangers, by God, I'll send them home if we're within 20 feet of where we're going. So that's taking a strong stand to maintain a sense of unity within that discipline, within the military. And they went through some strife in this book. They actually existed. They were real life Rangers too. Okay. I just like this quote. It had to do with 302. I did like 302 too, but that's not. This, when McNaught ordered some lobsters, he said, "Big, fat, lazy lobsters, not tough, skinny army ones." And 2 quarts of ale. Okay, now this describes copper that lined cliffs. You just find sheets of copper. Why, you see lakes like oceans, tremendous mountains rolling off for 1,000 miles into a golden haze. There's cliffs of solid copper along the lakes. He took from his pocket a worn chunk of copper the size of a horse chestnut and tossed it on the table. There's springs that gush 3 rods in the air, oil lying on top of the ground so you can touch a coal to it and put your meat to broil. Rivers so long you can travel for months on them. There's bones out there, bones of animals so big you can't put in this tavern. You can't even dream what it's like. Why, I've seen, and he trails off. That's just amazing. I just can't imagine pools of oil like that. But that's how it was early on until people staked claims over everything. Now, I could have skipped some good parts, but these are parts that seem to stick out. Okay, I just found this very humorous, and maybe it was more in context. It's about Anne and her dislike for the Indians. Not Anne, Elizabeth. Okay. Anne, habitually a silent girl, was of course all the quieter for Elizabeth's talkativeness, and fell into the position of tirewoman with a voiceless meekness that was touching and to me enraging too. Airily, Elizabeth thought of 1,000 frippery errands for her. "And, child," she'd say, "I've left my kerchief on my cabin. Run, fetch it for me, child, will you?" Or, "Child, I've lost my patch box. I'm afraid you'll never could find it, could you?" Handkerchiefs, patch box, smelling salts, fans, sunshade, powder, eau de cologne, mirror, scissors, sewing bag, book. Anne found them all. I don't know, I found that's not exactly the one I found. There's this next one that's Elizabeth bossing Anne around. Okay, some more of Elizabeth. Under McNaught's guidance, I went myself to the encampment day after day to sketch Indians. The first day I took Anne to carry my books and crayons, but when I called to her on the second day, Elizabeth came to the door of the major's room and looked at me archly. It was a look I was coming to dislike as being the forerunner of something I always liked even less. "Don't you think, Landon," she said, "that it would be better if Anne stayed here today? Bad boy. Wasn't I a twitter yesterday thinking of her among all those Indians?" "I don't see why," I said. "She likes to go. She'll learn a lot. Finding out how they live. It's an opportunity. "Oh, the nasty things," Elizabeth cried. "The way they dress! Some of them have hardly anything on, and a young female—" "But that's natural," I interrupted. They wear coverings when they need 'em, but when they don't—" Elizabeth looked haughty. "That's enough, Landon. Unclothedness, even of savages, isn't a subject to be discussed between the sexes. Anne's been placed in my charge by her father, and she's not to go. There are 100 things for her to do here, where she's needed." I could only bow to her wishes and go to the encampment with McNaught. So that's them living in Indian territory, but Elizabeth doesn't agree with their lifestyle. I found this interesting, how the Indian chief used to mark off a map territory to describe parts of the land. McNaught put the question, and Pontiac brooded a moment, then picked up 3 flat rocks and placed them on the ground with their ends touching a common center. At the center he thrust a twig, tapped his fingers against it, and said, "Michilimackinac." Then he tapped the rocks, calling them by name: Lake Huron, Lake Michigan, Lake Superior. Scooping up a handful of pebbles, he tossed them one by one beyond the twig, as if each one left his hand. He gave it the name of an Indian tribe or nation: Lake Laploy, Winnipeg, Kilistoni, Assinipoil, Kamanistaqua, Nipigon, La Pointe, Delaney, Sault Ste. Marie, Michipokitan, Fond du Lac, Saguenay, Ottawa, Gens des Gros Isles, Milwaukee, full of vines, and so on. The pebbles began to fall far, far beyond the twig. "Mandans," Pontiac said, "Pawnees, Cheyennes, Kanzas, Ponkas, Crows, Blackfeet, Sioux." When he said Sioux, he scattered the remaining pebbles in a wide semicircle beyond the others. So he was given an idea. He's making a map using sticks and pebbles on the ground. All right, this is just to describe how rich men are very greedy for land. McNaught's reply was prompt and violent. "He's after what all those big fellers are after. Land. They're all after land. Funny thing about rich men, the more land they have, the more they want. They ain't no satisfying 'em. You'd think Johnson would have enough land on Mohawk to keep him busy all the rest of his life. And so he has, because he ain't going to live much longer. He's burnt himself out with his squaws, and he ain't healthy. All the land he really needs is a piece 6 feet long by 2 wide. And he's like all the rest of 'em. He wants all he can get, all there is. Land he'll probably never see. Land that'll probably never give him anything but grief." It's just a greedy guy he's describing, who wants land, and it was a rush in the 1700s and the 1800s. Probably as far back as the 1600s, when the Pilgrims settled down, first started making settlements. They're describing Robert Rogers' new position as governor. I like towards the end of it, so I'll read the whole thing. "Stephen Grosbeck and every other one of us," Grosbeck said earnestly. He raised his glass. "Well, gentlemen, we've been waiting and waiting for the governor, and here he is, an old friend, knows traders and everything about Indians, and more about North America than anybody in the world. Ain't never been afraid of nobody, and never won't. Here's to our new governor, Major Robert Rogers, world-renowned Commander Rogers Rangers, who puts an end to uncertainty and brings business back to life. Drink hearty, gentlemen." He puts an end to uncertainty. I like that little passage. It's always comforting to know when somebody's that capable. And here's a great description of the Indian life. I just thought was awesome. I need no sketches to remind me of the ever-changing scenes that kept my crayons busy all that winter. Wanotans, braves, were live sparrowhawks, with live sparrowhawks made fast to their heads, papers of pin dangling from their hair, looking glasses suspended from their garments. The white skin tents on the brown prairie in the late autumn, old Dakota women cooking buffalo and dog meat in iron kettles over fires of dried buffalo dung, wiping their fingers on their own hair or on the hair of their dogs, rinsing their hands in a kettle of warm drinking water from which we were all supposed to drink. Bands of buffalo merging into herds so vast that the barren prairie seemed to have sprouted a vast and solid forest of brown scrub, hard-riding young men, their long hair streaming out behind, lashing frantic ponies against the flanks of those herds to leave hundreds of shaggy mud-caked carcasses on the prairie, bloody gangs of women, children, and old men hacking dead buffaloes into chunks. So that's what he was living amongst with the Indians there. Okay, I found this interesting. It's describing the poor nature of some Indians. Some parts of this country were just so wretched. What Wanotan eventually revealed was that the country of the Assiniboines in the summer was flat and watery, too wet for good hunting. So flat and watery that 3 great rivers rose within the radius of a mile. One of the St. Lawrence, another the Mississippi, and the third the river that flows north into Hudson's Bay. Because of countless rivers, lakes, and marshes, Wanotan said the mosquitoes were terrible beyond belief, settling on travelers in clouds. Because of the wetness, there was little game. And to the westward, the country was barren, and the Indians poor. So poor, they weren't worth fighting. I thought that was interesting. They're not even worth fighting. Okay, we got reference to debtor's prison. There really wasn't anything to read so much, but it's just alarming. It seems like that's what's going on in America here. If we lose our trading business, we starve or die in debtor's prison. They'll throw you in prison for going into debt. And that's kind of what's going on in America these days. They were describing that in England in the 1700s. Okay, now this is don't ever talk too much. Tell the truth and stuff in business negotiations. This is McNaught. Okay. If you go see him, you may not lose your temper, but you're pretty apt to tell him the truth about a lot of things. And if you do that, you won't find out nothing you want to know. No, Langland, you're a good artist, but you're a terrible bad trader, so I'll be the one to see Klaus. So yeah, he's talking about how you tell the truth too much in negotiations, and you want to maintain a steely resolve, a poker face. Alright. Oh yeah, okay, flip. Well, Anne mixed flip for us. I have no idea what flip is, I just thought I'd throw that in there. That's it, this thick book, 600 plus pages. Stop.